We're going to give some superlatives to the 2024 Seattle Mariners. MVP, Cy Young, Comeback Player of the Year, etc. We're going to go over all of that in today's video before we talk about a player for the Seattle Mariners that is tearing it up down to the Arizona Fall League in Colt Emerson. And that made us think, could the Mariners possibly have a guy like one of these prospects in their starting lineup on opening day in 2025? Could one of these guys break camp with the Mariners? We're going to talk about all of that and more here in episode 129 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav network, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Be sure to give us a 5-star review. And this is the Secular Monk episode, always in streams, always a homie. Joe, how are we feeling today?
You really embellished on that. Could one of these guys be in our... I was trying to hold my breath, and you completely elaborated more. You were trying to set me up for failure. I'm feeling worse now, okay? I'm feeling worse. Because I couldn't hold my breath for your entire intro, and I really let myself down. But happy that it's Secular's episode. Like you said, always hang out in the stream, always a good time there. It's one of my favorite moments of the off season, before the off season really does get kind of like going into high gear. It's kind of like bookended, the off season is. Like, you got the Arizona Fall League, then you got spring training, and then both moments, some of my favorite things to do is just completely overreacting to the dumbest stuff as far as player stats are concerned. Like, they don't really matter in the Fall League. They don't really matter in spring training. But Colt Emerson, you tweeted it. That's our 2025 second baseman. And then at Count Conti, or Kant, I don't know if the E is silenced, whatever, but 2027 shortstop, you mean? And then I said 2026 third baseman, actually. Colt Emerson, doesn't matter where he's going to be eventually when it comes up, what year, doesn't matter, right? The bat seems like it's going to play him into a position. But I'm just going to throw this out there. I think my position of third base for Colt Emerson is the odds-on favorite for what I think he will end up being when he does make it to the big league club for Seattle. Depends on where, positions you're at, like how they kind of develop, like if Ben Williamson does anything. But I think third base is still going to be wide open for Colt Emerson by the time he gets here. I think shortstop will have something else figured out. And I think Cole Young is going to have second base. So, again, odds-on favorite, third base, the underdog there. Second base, you want to take the middle line, take shortstop, but you can find plenty of other betting lines and odds and trends with BetOnline. Thank you to BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. Postseason baseball, but most importantly, the NFL regular season is here, and BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And if you think that you know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. Head to the website today to get in on the action, and remember, BetOnline, the game starts here. Through 2 games, Colton, if I was going to give an MVP to someone in the Arizona Fall League, it would be Colt Emerson, but we're not really giving out superlatives for a season that's not even complete, all right? There is, though, the 2024 regular season for the Seattle Mariners that we can take a look at and give out some awards, some superlatives for, if there's really anyone on the team that deserves any. Colton, where do you want to start this Mariner Mojo Awards season?
Yeah, I think we start, Joe, with Gold Glove, because I think there's a couple of different options here in Julio Rodriguez, Cal Raleigh, of course. JP had a good year defensively, but I think that the guy, it has to be Cal. I mean, he did everything right behind the plate. He was throwing guys out. One of the best pitch framers in all of baseball. One of the best blockers in all of baseball. Offensively, we know what Cal Raleigh did in 2024, but defensively, one of the best catchers in baseball. And he's going to win the Gold Glove at the catching position. I firmly believe that. So I got to give the Gold Glove to Cal Raleigh.
I think there's only one other point of contention that kind of slipped by you there. It is going to be Cal. Like, if you're going to have a conversation about best defender on the Mariners, best defensive year, it is Cal. But Josh Rojas filled in very nicely for Gino Suarez over at third base in his absence in 2024. So maybe there's people that are going to value that a little bit more. But again, it can't be understated how valuable Cal was defensively behind the plate for 140-ish games, maybe not even that many, but close enough. The amount of, he had the most innings caught in all of baseball. Dude deserves the Gold Glove for sure, especially just with how well he performed defensively too. If he was botching balls and missing curveballs like Yainer Diaz back there, he wouldn't win the actual award, but Cal's going to this year.
So that brings us, Joe, I think we go to the guys throwing the baseballs and reliever of the year here. A couple guys for sure that do make some sense. Obviously, Andres Munoz, Colin Snyder, I think Troy Taylor. Those are kind of the three guys that I think we can really lump in there that you could choose from. But it has to go, in my opinion, to Andres Munoz. Had a couple 4-out saves, had a 5-out save during the season. We know that he was the guy at the back end of the bullpen. Had a few blown saves. It does happen. I mean, it's just bound to happen no matter what. But Andres Munoz, he was an all-star for a reason. We know how good he was. The Mariners were able to bring him in leverage spots, and he more often than not got the job done.
Yeah, I guess like conglomerate metric that I kind of like to look at is usually ERA plus. I'm on Fangraph, so it's ERA minus. It's the same exact stat essentially. 100 is league average. The lower their number, the better for ERA minus. The higher number, the better for ERA plus. Like, for example, Emmanuel Clase had like an ERA plus of like 649. Like, dude was going crazy. I don't think ERA minus works where it can go into the negatives like that. It feels like, how far that goes. But regardless, the best Mariners pitcher, as far as ERA minus is concerned, it's one of the guys that you named, and it's not Andres Munoz. It's Colin Snyder. I will say, did not have as many innings pitched as Andres Munoz in 2024, so I think my vote is still for Munoz, just given like the leverage spots he was put into. Like you said, the all-star for a reason, was striking out batters at a 33.2% clip, had a batting average against of 153. Like, Munoz, again, in a situation where he needed to be that guy all the time, where as in years past, you've had Seawald to be a buffer, you've had Brash to be a buffer, and then the guys that fill in around them, like Topa last year, and say like, oh, who was the guy in 2022? Was it, I guess,
And Murphy?
Murphy, and I guess kind of like Brash's emergence in that season as well. Mm-hmm. Like, that's Snyder for this year, like the random guy that does kind of pop off. But yeah, the reliever of the year for me does go to Andres Munoz again.
For Colin Snyder, I think that I'd give him like breakout player of the year. I think that's what makes more sense to me for him because he has never really, burst onto the scene before.
Sure.
And then he was able to come into the Mariners, basically what they always do with their pitching lab, and turn a guy who has struggled before into a legitimate back end of the bullpen guy. So I'm going to give that to Colin Snyder. Where are you at for comeback player of the year?
That was breakout player.
Breakout player of the year, right?
I see what you're doing. You're baiting me. You're baiting me into my answer because, Colton, both my breakout and comeback player of the year are the same guy. And I understand that maybe he fits into one spot better than the other, but I look to Victor Robles and where he was at with the Nationals, say, in 2024, lost a starting spot, just kind of lost his spot on the roster. It's not, I mean, it wasn't even like James Wood or Dylan Cruz really knocking at the door by the time he was released, but he just wasn't a part of their plan anymore. A very highly touted prospect for a long time, obviously won a World Series with them, but never really was like a big part of what they were doing at the major league level as far as production is concerned. The expectations for him coming to Seattle were low, and he blew those out of the water. So I think comeback player of the year is likely the more fitting. But I also think breakout. I don't think we've ever seen his offensive hit tool kind of register in this way as consistently over a like long period of time throughout the season. He played his way into an everyday starting spot and eventually the everyday leadoff spot, essentially. Sure, he does a lot of things, not a lot of things. He does some things that are annoying, like trying to bunt all the time and consistently injuring his hand. So if there's like the most like annoying nagging injury award of the year, it might go to Robles' finger or his hand or something, but I'm giving breakout and comeback player of the year to Victor Robles. Just, he eventually became the third most valuable position player on this team by the end of the season. When he first came over, a dropped, misplayed fly ball and a ground into double play in his first game, everyone thought he was cooked in that first game, and then he ends up being one of the most fan favorites and just overall best players for the team in 2024 by season's end.
I'd be interested to go back and find, because I know that I tweeted something about like the way he started his career as a Mariner. We should go back and find it. I think it'd be interesting. I don't remember what I said, but yeah, I would go with Victor for comeback player of the year. A guy who was legitimately released without a position, without a team. So in my opinion, he's comeback player of the year. A guy who was a top 5 prospect in all of baseball, fell off the face of the earth, became someone who could not stay healthy, could not find consistent playing time. And then, of course, he comes to the Mariners, and you basically listed everything that he did here. Okay, Joe, I think we just get right into it. Who is your MVP?
Cal Raleigh. There's There's no other answer. I think just given around the entire success as a whole for him on the season, defensively, offensively, it's the best offensive season by a catcher, I think, in Mariners history. And then you could argue in Major League Baseball this season, I mean, he led the league in home runs from the catching position, but there are guys like William Contreras and maybe even Yainer Diaz who might trump him in terms of what they did offensively. But Cal could also be in the conversation for Silver Slugger at the catching position as well. So he was the team MVP for sure. I think he was a top 15 player by F4 in all of baseball. He had the highest F4 of any player on the Seattle Mariners. So he is without a doubt, unanimous team MVP for me. I'm assuming you're in the same boat.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think number 2 would honestly be Victor Robles for me over Julio. Just because of what he meant to this team. Obviously, like you said, he was the 3rd most valuable player, but had he played like that at the entire season for the Mariners, he would have probably been above Julio, if not even above Cal, the way that he was playing. And so I think that Cal is a guy who, like you said, he set the record for the most home runs in 4 years first 4 years by a catcher, most in the first 4 years by a Mariner as a whole. Like he was legitimately he had 100 RBI as a catcher, which is crazy. Like there are so many accolades you can give Cal Raleigh in 2024 that, I mean, but MVP just basically encompasses them all. Silver Slugger, I'd give him that too. Obviously, most home runs on the team. God, what else can we give Cal Raleigh? Like the Golden Dumper, I'd give him that if that was an award. You know, like it's not.
Do it. Make it one right now.
So again, Joe, the guys that are throwing to Cal Raleigh, this one I think is interesting because there are a couple different ways that you could go with it. However, who do you have as your Cy Young? Because I think there are 3 to 4 guys that really fit this bill.
3. There's 3.
4. No, there's 4.
No, there's 3. Don't lie to
4.
Don't lie to yourself about the 4th. There's no way you're gonna try and lump in George Kirby into this conversation.
Oh, I'm not.
Who's the 4th for you then?
Andres Munoz.
Oh, boo. Emmanuel Clase is not even gonna win Cy Young as having one of the best reliever years in all of baseball, like in baseball history. No.
He should finish.
He's gonna finish top 5, but I guess Munoz being the 4th could be fine. The 3 starting pitchers are Woo, Miller, and Logan Gilbert, right? Yeah. All 3 had amazing years. George Kirby led the team in F4 in terms of pitching F4. So I'm just saying he's my Cy. I think honestly, even though he did not finish as strongly as he started, I think I'm going to give the longevity and the amount of innings and the cumulative strikeouts, right? I'm going to give the edge to Logan Gilbert. I think I will. I understand why people would go Woo. I understand why people would go Miller. I think honestly, Miller has the better chance to overtake Gilbert in a lot of these conversations, just given the fact that Miller had 31 starts versus Woo was injured for part of the season, right? I think though I still will give it to Logan Gilbert. Yes, his ERA did not finish below 3, unlike Miller and Woo's did, but I think the over 200 innings, leading all of them will be in innings pitched, having over 200 strikeouts for the first time in his career. He, I think, led the league in WHIP as well. I think the first Mariner season to have over 200 innings and a WHIP below 1 or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think Connor, the Couch GM, had a graphic that he posted about it sometime last week. But my Cy Young goes to Logan Gilbert. You predicted at the beginning of the year. Are you sticking to your early season guns right now?
Yeah, I think I have to. Again, he has more innings. He had made a couple more starts, of course, than Bryce Miller. More innings pitched than Bryce Miller. Overall, I take the guy who was the ace of your staff, in my opinion. Bryce Miller had some of the grittiest, the best performances, in my opinion, of the season of any Mariner starting pitcher. But Logan, over the entire season, was the guy. I mean, Bryce Miller did have a few blow-up starts. So did Logan, which is probably why his ERA finished, where it did. But Logan Gilbert's a guy that really took a step forward in 2024. And, there might have been a mechanical change that was made. Wink, Joe, wink. But Bryce Miller, I would have number 2, and then Brian Woo, just because of the injury concern with him, I would have him finish number 3. If Brian Woo, if everything was even, let's say all the guys threw the same amount of innings, this would be different.
Oh yeah.
In my opinion, this would if everyone threw the same amount of innings, it'd probably be Brian Woo in that scenario because of how good he was this year. But you can again argue all 3 sides there. Bryce Miller came out and gave some of the guttiest performances. Best starting pitcher performance, Joe. Let's just throw it out there, huh? best starting pitcher performance, I'm going with Bryce Miller against the Braves in like April.
You've been like pounding that drum for ages.
That game was incredible.
That like as the pitching performance for the year. What was it? 7 innings, like 1 earned, 2 hits, 10 Ks, something silly like that. I think that was one of the finalists for Jake's Raise the Trident Awards for best
Who
pitching
submitted
performance.
that option?
Could have been anybody who submitted that one, honestly. I think I submitted it too. So hopefully it wins. Off the top of my head, I think maybe the first time Brian Wu goes 7 innings would be in contention. Like the first time in his career he goes 7 innings, just given how well he battled all year and how much like adversity he has like fought through in his first 2 seasons as far as like innings limits concerned and just battling back from injuries, and specifically in 2024 trying to get back on the right track, being healthy, because like earlier in the year we were like, oh god, we're never going to see this guy pitch past the 4th inning because of the leash that he is given. And then once he finally kind of got taken off of it, it was like what, 3-4 starts in a row where he was just going 7 innings in a row. I think the first one, I don't remember who was even against at this point, so I don't even think I could put it in the same conversation as the one that you're speaking about for Bryce Miller. So I will just,
I was there.
I will just default to Bryce Miller's start against the Braves as well. But
yeah, I mean his start down in Minute Maid also, like that is one of those ones that was like one of those like he's him, like he's here, like Bryce Miller is the guy moving forward. He is a bona fide, it should probably be the number 3 in your rotation next year behind George and Logan. So with Luis Castillo dropping to like 4 or 5, like that is to the point where I view Bryce Miller after this season. He blew my expectations out of the water. All 4 guys, no, that's not true. All 3 guys that I talked about in my Cy Young contenders, all 3 of them blew my expectations out of the water.
Yeah.
Do you have an offensive performance that really sticks out to you? Like, there's definitely, like, of course, Julio in Texas where he had those 2 home runs, but I was also, like, not watching that game, so, like, it's hard for me to really say that one, but he had 2 home runs versus Texas, went, like, 3 for 5 with, like, 6 RBI or something like that. Cal Raleigh hitting home runs from both sides of the plate multiple times. He had the walk, like, but what's maybe like
grand slam against,
like your biggest offensive moment, I guess, of the year, the one that stands out to you the most?
I think the one that stands out to me the most, it's almost like a bittersweet situation, but Garver's walk-off in that Braves game, because I think there's, without a doubt, everyone kind of signal beam, like lit the signal. This is the turning point for Mitch Garver. This is, now we go. This is the moment. And it just never happened. And I think maybe it almost lives in infamy for me of like, wow, he really just never figured it out in 2024. Even after like the sigh of relief on his face when he hit that home run, like, oh, thank God, drop the bat and then round the bases. He never got that level again. The entire season.
That's also mine again, because I was at that game. It's the same game as the Miller 7 innings pitched game. It's the exact same game, and I just remember texting you and being like, I hate baseball, blah blah blah. Mariners offense sucks, blah blah. I was also cold as hell. It was freezing that game, and then I was sitting in the bleachers up top, and I went down to like the concourse and was standing down below, and there was a guy standing next to me, and Garver hit that ball, and we didn't say anything. We just turned and high-fived each other. Never met the guy in my life, never spoke a word to him other than like, hell yeah, high-fived him. That was it. And like that's just baseball at its finest. All right, so final superlative here, Joe. I think we go with, who is your prospect of the year? Like the guy that you think made the most ground in the prospect rankings for the Mariners. A guy who maybe caught you off guard, maybe you didn't expect it was going to happen. Just who do you think had the best year?
It could be a loaded question.
I think there's one guy that stands out. There's a couple guys that stand out to me. One guy I think that stands out is something we didn't expect out of him. Another one is what we expected, but still.
I don't know if there's really a wrong answer. Right. I think you can go with next Jose Ramirez, Michael Arroyo, who did get beaten out by Lazaro Montes for offensive like minor league player of the year in the Mariners organization. Arroyo popped 23 home runs across Modesto and Everett High A in 2024. Like a big power surge for him, where in previous years in 2022 in rookie ball popped 4, and then all of last year in 2023 only popped 3 home runs. So somehow, some way found that power stroke, 23 homers, 89 driven in. Did strike out a decent amount, 136 times compared to 73 walks, so maybe that kind of takes him down a peg there. Obviously, Montes won the award, so it's hard to argue him. But I think a guy that, I mean, just kind of flew under the radar and then just jumped into the top 15 prospect ranks was Brandon Garcia.
Yeah.
Starting pitcher down in Arkansas, was with the team last year in 2023, rookie ball. Modesto, I mean, only pitched 10 innings because he was drafted in the 2023, like he was drafted in 2023 in the 11th round, so really didn't play a ton in 2023, but in 2024 through 68 and a third innings pitched in Everett through 12 starts, had a 1.84 ERA. Moved right on up to Arkansas and didn't really miss a beat either. Through 47 and 2/3, had a 2.83 ERA in 13 starts. A guy that wasn't on anyone's top 30s immediately jumped in the top 15, I think. So I will say Brandon Garcia is my pick for the minor league player of the year, just on the fact that flew under the radar, and then now we're talking about him maybe making an impact in 2025, getting some starts if the Mariners should need him at some point.
Yeah, it's somebody that I don't think that anyone really expected. A guy who, I'm not gonna lie, I hardly knew anything about the guy. Like
Yeah.
going into this season, you could have been like, hey man, how about Brandon Garcia? But like who?
Oops.
And you know, maybe that's my bad. But I think I look to the two guys you mentioned prior to that, in Michael Arroyo and Las Montes. Both guys had incredible years here. If I'm looking at, both guys had a very similar path as well. Not to mention, dude, it's tough. Las Montes had a worse year at high A than Michael Arroyo did. Michael Arroyo really came through once he got to high A. He played 60 games in high A. Laz played 51. Laz hit 260, 378, 427 with 8 home runs. Whereas Michael Arroyo in high A hit 291, 397, 519 with 12 homers.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, I probably have to give it to Michael Arroyo, which sucks because I freaking love Las Montes. He's one of my favorite people on in the Mariners prospect ranking. And Michael Arroyo plays a much more premium position than Lazaro Montes.
Kinda. I think it's middle infield, but I think he grades out better as a second baseman anyways.
Right, which I think is still more important than an outfielder. I think it's easier to find an outfielder, you know what I mean? Especially with what the Mariners have currently.
Yeah, I guess
not that any of these guys are going to be here in the next year, but I think I have to give it to Michael Arroyo. Both guys are 19. I think both guys probably start next year in Arkansas. I think that they get a little kooky with it, and start both guys in Arkansas next year. But Joe, a guy who we didn't mention here, but a guy who is off to an amazing start down to the Arizona Fall League is Colt Emerson. In his first game down in the Arizona Fall League, he went 5 for 6 with 4 doubles. In his second game, he went 3 for 5 with another double. This guy, obviously, he said himself that he wants to go down there and work on mechanics. But he is down there absolutely raking for what's the name of their team down there?
Peoria Javelinas.
Javelinas? Yeah, the Javelinas. And it's so exciting to see these guys. The roster that was put together for the Mariners Arizona Fall League is actually kind of gas.
Mm-hmm.
They put together a really good roster down there. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to go down there and watch, A, it's expensive, B, it's hot. So I didn't. Mm-hmm. But Colt Emerson as a whole having a really good, it's only 2 games, right? So like you said, we're overreacting. It's also the Fall League, but you mentioned something at the start of this podcast about it's the Fall League, blah, 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 doesn't really matter, blah, blah, blah. One guy that, at least for me, that burst onto the scene with the Arizona Fall League is Penn Murphy. That is a guy, and I know we've already mentioned him once in this podcast so far, but Penn Murphy, if I go back here, what year was that? It was 2019 for Penn Murphy. He was drafted in 27, that's when he was in college. He was drafted 2018. But in 2019, he put up a 1.23 ERA on 6 innings pitched, 6 games, 22 innings pitched, struck out 30. Walked 5 in those 22 innings pitched. That is when he really burst onto the scene for me specifically. And then he went down to play in the Dominican Winter League in 2021 to 22. And that's where it really cemented it for me, because he had a 208 in 17 and a third down there, striking out 19 while walking only 2. That is where Penn Murphy's put his name on the map for me. And not to say that Colt Emerson's name isn't already on the map, because obviously it is. Mm-hmm. But it's just I look at those games down there, and sure, competition's a little bit easier, but I believe Colt Emerson's still one of the youngest guys down there.
It's a situation where I think the reason why you're kind of bringing that up is the fact that it's just about reps. And you're talking about leading it with like Emerson talking about wanting to get mechanics right. One, he just did have a shortened-ish season because some injuries held him back for a large part of the year. Only played in well, he played in 69 games
Nice.
between Modesto and Everett, but did have a single game in rookie ball as like a rehab type situation, water bottle moment. So I get why he wants to go down there, and it's mainly just about reps. Because even with the limited amount of games played, went from Modesto, sitting 293, 440, 427, playing well enough, didn't really need to be down in Modesto, right? We all knew that Colt Emerson, he was going to find his way to Everett at some point in 2024. Didn't have the easiest of times in Everett. You saw the average dip to 225, on base dip to 331, slugging dip to 317. So about a 100-point drop off in both on base and slugging there. You see the strikeouts go from 27 across 150 at bats in Modesto to 30 and 120 at bats in Everett. So does climb a little bit there, not a ton, but a little bit. So I think, and to credit Colt Emerson, he is still, like you're saying, very, very young. He's 19. Like, he won't turn 20 until July 20th, 2005. Like, he's got some time being a teenager still to really develop as far as just like his baseball profile is concerned, right? And being in the fall league, getting those reps, if he continues to pop off, one, it's going to not only just continue to put his name on the map, even more so because people are talking like, oh, he might be a consensus top 20, top 15, top 10 prospect by the time, the time it's all said and done, when he's like really at the height of his prospect like capital. But in that same vein, it's like I hope that he doesn't slow down, because if things do start to sour a little bit, it's like, okay, are those mechanic changes worthwhile? Is it now holding him back by being there and going through the motions and not really like practicing in the best way? Or like, I don't know, like it's a bunch of he said she said. Like, at this point through 2 games, he's crushing it. I hope he continues in that way, but it's not without, like, I guess, like a lens of criticism. Like, it is just the fall league. Like, do they matter? Yes and no. Like, it's kind of like however you want to view it. As same goes for spring training. Like, some guys look great in spring training. Like Polanco last year had like a 1.0 OPS in spring training, and then couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat in the regular season. So take those Arizona Fall League stats with a grain of salt as far as Colt Emerson
No.
is concerned, but also have fun with it. Just watch him continue four doubles in a game. That's nuts. Like, that's crazy. Like, good for him. So I hope he continues in that way.
So it got me thinking, because I obviously Mariners Miners has been tweeting about this stuff with the Arizona Fall League. It got me thinking, so with the Mariners offensive issues in 2023, what guys could come up, I'm sorry, 2024, what guys could come up in 2025 and make an impact? Colt Emerson, obviously no. However, there are some other guys, and I want to run some names by you. Just just no thoughts, just vibes, Joe. Can these guys break camp? Ready?
Yeah.
Harry Ford,
No.
Ben Williamson,
No.
Cole Young.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Um,
Break
that was
camp
really
is
all I
in
had.
like opening day roster.
Opening day roster.
Again, like to pump the brakes. Harry Ford's going to have Mitch Garver gone.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Williamson is going to need to hit 350 in spring training. I think the easiest path for any guy is honestly Cole Young. He's plays the position of need at second base. Not to say that Ben Williamson doesn't play a position of need at third base, but Young has had more time in the system to develop. Sure, Ben Williamson was a Cape Cod League college draftee as opposed to Young being a high school draftee, so it's like a little bit different as far as development is concerned, because they're the same age, or Williamson is a year older.
Williamson's 3 years older.
2 years older, 3 years older.
3. Williamson's 23. Cole Young is 20.
Cole Young is 21.
Oh well, he's 21 now. Williamson was playing in his age 23 season. He will be 24 on November 5th. Okay.
Okay.
Less than a month.
I think so. Yeah, it's like 3 years, 10 months. I think with Williamson, there's not a bunch of power there. It's more of a doubles guy. He might be Mariners minor league system Alec Bohm as it stands right now. Your trade guy. So maybe they don't trade for him and they just bring up Ben Williamson to break camp. Again, I think I really like going on Twitter and seeing all the Ben Williamson highlights get posted because it's always a defensive play and then it's always him ripping a gap, like a double in the gap. I think he's got, out of the three you said, I still think Cole Young is the most likely, but I think Ben Williamson has the second chance. I just think he will need to show that he can hit in spring training, and I think he's going to be given a serious chance to do so on the offensive side. But you seem kind of hell-bent that it might be Ben Williamson.
I mean, obviously, it all depends on what happens with this roster moving forward throughout the offseason. But let's just say the roster stayed the same, which, my God, if this roster stays the same.
Please don't.
If this roster was to stay the same, I think it's Ben Williamson. I think Ben Williamson is your opening day third baseman. You moved Rojas to second. That's what I think you would do in that situation.
Okay.
Let me just read some numbers for you. Okay. Again, Ben Williamson will be 24 going into next year. He did not get to spend all year at AA like Cole Young did. However, so I'll just read you Ben Williamson's AA stats, even though he was obviously better in high A, but I'll read you his AA stats. In 95 games, Ben Williamson hit 273, 365, 374. Like you said, not a lot of power, for a 739 OPS. Cole Young hit 267. That's not true. 271, 369, 390 for a 759 OPS. So 10 points lower in the OPS. Only a 390 slugging compared to Ben Williamson's 365. Not that much better. Cole Young did hit 9 home runs, but Ben Williamson hit, I believe, more doubles. Cole Young hit 25. Ben Williamson hit 23. Obviously less games, so the
Bro,
what?
You're trying to cherry pick stats and it's going in the wrong way for you.
he hit 2 less in 30 less games.
Ben Williamson is a more developed hitter than Cole Young. I agree.
Right.
I think his hit tool is more developed as it stands right now, and I think that is his easiest path to starting on the opening day roster in 2025 because we've seen what the glove can do. I think both guys can be a major league defensive, like they're not going to be a liability out there. It's going to come down to, can they hit their way into the everyday starting lineup? And I think, again, it goes both ways. You're saying that you call up Ben Williamson, you move Josh Rojas to second, leave Josh Rojas at third, call up Cole Young. Why not? What's the difference? And the difference is, I think whoever's hitting better in spring training. But those stats don't matter, so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I've been told.
Yeah.
The one caveat with Ben Williamson is he strikes out more.
Mm.
Cole Young struck out 97 times. I'm sorry, this is Ben Williamson. Ben Williamson struck out 97 times in those 95 games, so we'll call it one a game-ish. Cole Young in his 124 games struck out 87 times.
Mm-hmm.
So less than Ben Williamson did in 30 more games. The walks do also, of course, favor Cole Young in that situation. Ben Williamson had 44 to Cole Young 67. So that's kind of where I think plate discipline is a big thing right there. Because Dickey Stevenson Park in Arkansas is a hard place to hit.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that before with a lot of guys. That's why I would expect both guys, if they don't start on the open day roster, I think they'll both start in AAA next year.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I want to say Cole Young. I do, because we need a 20-year-old, bro. Let's get weird. You know what I mean? We've seen Jackson Merrill go ham sandwich in the playoffs. You know what I mean? We saw Evan Carter go ham sandwich in the playoffs last year. Let us have our 20-year-old super prospect guy. You know what I mean?
I'm ready.
Let it be Cole Young. Let's bring him up, have him bat 9 for you for a while, because I think that there's no better time, baby. If you want to stash him in AAA for a while, sure. I think that next year, and I don't know how you feel about this, but next year going into the season, do you start Cole Young, Ben Williamson, and Harry Ford all in AAA? Do you think they all move up?
If they don't break camp, then yeah, I think they should all go to Tacoma and just get not used to hitting, but we all know the PCL is a hitter friendly league. I think that can build confidence. And sure, it didn't necessarily work out. Doesn't work out all the time. Dom Canzone mashes in AAA. Jared Kelenic mashed in AAA. Ryland Thomas, when we acquired him, from the Mets? That the Ryan Stanek trade?
Stanek,
right? big playoff hero Ryan Stanek, by the way, for the Mets. Rylan Thomas, I think, had like an 11-game hit streak when he first came over. A guy that I think also, like, he's not like really like a prospect in the Mariners system. I mean, he is, but he isn't. It's like a Cade Marlowe, like Zach DeLoach type player of like your fourth outfielder. I think that's a guy that if he continues to just hit well throughout like like throughout spring training into the regular season, like that could be a guy that if you've got an open roster spot, he might get a cup of coffee in April. But who knows how like valuable that really will be for him. But I'm looking on like the ETA tab because one, there it's not super accurate, but it's just kind of fun to look at. I know we're not really considering Ryan Bliss or Tyler Locklear in these conversations, like guys that have already seen big league time, but there are names that are listed as 2025 ETA. I'm just going to go through them really quickly. So Cole Young, talked about. Harry Ford, we've talked about. Michael Morales, 2025. Brandon Garcia, 2025. Taylor Dollard. we actually get 3 in a row from 21 to 23 here. Taylor Dollard, Brock Rodden, and Jimmy Joyce. All 2025.
I mean, I could see them going with Jimmy Joyce like out of the bullpen. Like I would not say at the beginning of the year, like not break camp wise, but like at the end of the year, similar to what they did with Troy Taylor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like the last guy is Reed Van Scooter, 2025 ETA. So it's just, I think it's just guys in their development path, kind of like where they expect it to be, and that's just what ETA is like how they expect them to develop, right?
Right.
So out of those ones, I don't want to necessarily say the position players. Let's pick a pitcher. If there's one out of that list that stands out to you to maybe break camp in the bullpen, or it doesn't have to be someone in there. Like a lot of people are high on Luis Crivello, who is pitching very well down in Arkansas, or maybe your guy Travis Kuhn has a big spring training, right? Or Raul Alcantara. Like there are names down there that you might not expect, but it could also be like Carlos Vargas's time to shine. Maybe the Geno trade finally pays some dividends. Like if there's a pitcher as opposed to a position player now that you'd like to see potentially break camp in the bullpen, it won't be in the rotation. I mean, knock on wood, it's not in the rotation, because if it's someone's in the rotation, something bad probably happened. But if it's someone in the bullpen, where does your initial like thought go to?
Well, let me backtrack here really quick. Did you mention Logan Evans at all in there?
It isn't. I don't think it said 2025. I think it said 2026.
Did it say 24?
It says 2026 for Logan Evans.
Really? That's a guy that I would put on there for 2025. Not necessarily out of the bullpen, of course, because they moved him back to being a starting pitcher.
Again, that's why the ETA thing, it's just kind of a big old mumbo jumbo. Because one, he came out of the draft very bad. And then the Mariners pitching lab said, hey, by the way, you're really good. So they probably just haven't adjusted it. If I had to guess, like whenever the next re-rank kind of happens going into spring training, that will probably say 2025, because they do make adjustments like that.
If we're going with a pitcher, I mean, it's got to be one of those guys you mentioned of Curvello or of like Jimmy Joyce, etc. Because I don't imagine that they would transition Brandon Garcia or Michael Morales to a reliever. I guess it's certainly possible. Like if the situation calls for it, sure. But I don't necessarily see that happening. So it's got to be like Carlos Vargas, Jimmy Joyce, like Curvello. Like there's name a guy. It's the Mariners and bullpen. I think any of them could do it.
Sure. Hunter Cranton, draftee, 2024 draftee, making a big jump there. I think a guy that might fly under the radar, lefty Peyton Alford, was pitching down in Arkansas in 2024. He's a bit on the older side, so he's about to be 27. I'm saying that as a 27-year-old makes me want to throw up a little bit. Had a 2.2 ERA in 57 and a third innings pitched down there. In 43 games, had 7 saves. So that's a guy on the older side. Maybe he's been in the Mariners farm system since 2021. I think that's a guy that could also, if you need a lefty, say they non-tender Sauce, they get rid of Gabe Spire, like they get a little wild and crazy, they want some new lefty blood, Peyton Alford could be an option for them as well.
Yeah, certainly. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, they have so many guys that could be coming up in 2025, but breaking camp, I think, is going to be ideally none of these guys break camp with the Mariners because they went out and they made moves.
Yeah,
that's the best case scenario.
They signed Willy Adames and they signed Carlos Estevez, and they don't need those big reinforcements from the prospect system because they got them in the free agency pool.
That's right. We got a hell of an offseason ahead of us. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 129 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented by Bet Online, the Joey McMurchie episode of the podcast, and go Mariners.